Wednesday, September 22nd meeting of the City of Charlotte Redistricting Committee meeting. My name is Malcolm Graham. I serve as committee chairman, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each and every one of you to this early morning meeting. This meeting was originally scheduled for Monday of this week, and we rescheduled it for today to make sure that everyone would be here. Mr. Driggs had a conflict on Monday of this week, and we accommodate him by rescheduling the meeting for today. So let's take this opportunity to introduce everyone who's with us on the committee virtually, and then those who are visiting virtually can do the same, but we'll start with our committee members first.
Ed Driggs, committee member.
Good morning, Dimple Ajmera, committee member.
Greg Phipps, committee member.
And those who are visiting virtually, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Wiles, Mayor.
Welcome, Madam Mayor. Good morning.
Good morning.
And could we introduce those who are in the room, any council members who are in the room present visiting with us today?
Braxton Winston at large.
Good morning, Councilmember Winston. And now we'll introduce those around the table working with the team.
Matt McCarley with Parker Poe.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Janata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Rebecca Hefner, Innovation and Technology.
Robert Serrata, Innovation and Technology.
Jason Schneider, Communications and Marketing.
That's everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment of personal preference as the chairman, just to make a couple opening comments. I clearly understand and know that redistricting can be a partisan issue, that it can be a political issue, but it doesn't have to be. There's an old saying, and I visited with a friend of mine in Raleigh yesterday, Senator Berger, worked with him for 10 years. He's the Republican president pro tem. He runs the state Senate. And he used to say that facts are stubborn things, that they simply do not move, and that everyone is entitled to their own opinions, their own comments, their own perspectives, but they're not entitled to their own facts. I believe that is true. This week, there are comments made about the actions of this committee and its chairman in reference to us not being fair, members feeling that they were ambushed, that we are not being fully transparent. That's just simply not factual. I think the record speaks for itself. I have said time and time again since the mayor gave me this opportunity to chair this committee that my goal and objective was to be open, transparent, honest, and to educate the community along the way. That is what the community expects. We clearly understand that Charlotte and Mecklenburg County is a blue community. Out of 20 state representatives and House members, there's only one Republican. The balance 20 or so are Democrats. On the county commission, there's 9 Democrats and no Republicans. 4 at-large members of the Charlotte City Council, 1 Democratic mayor, 5 Democratic districts, 2 Republicans. Our community is blue. But I made a goal that we would do our best effort to reflect the political balance in this community. I said it publicly on several occasions. I said it publicly last week on TV. I said it publicly at a press conference last week. And I'm saying it publicly again today. So the goal for this committee is to be fair and balanced to all parties involved. The public record, the facts doesn't reflect that anyone was ambushed or put upon or taken advantage of or given the opportunity to express how they felt. In fact, the public record reflects that when Mr. Driggs, a member of the minority party, who was late, arrived at the meeting, that he was immediately informed of the action that was taken by the committee. Mr. Phipps, a member of the committee, a Democrat, asked that we do so. As chairman, I agreed. We told him exactly the action that we took, and he responded on 3 occasions, regretfully, I agree, Regretfully, I agree. Yes, you are right. In fact, the meeting was downright cordial. We all tried to work together. We also said that we would make a special effort to get the input of each and every council member before we even draw any maps at all. We did so, including interviewing the mayor. At no time did any member of the minority party express any apprehensions about the process of being unfair, of being ambushed, or being taken advantage of. There was one threat, and we discarded that, and I told the staff to keep the information that we can use, and those that were irrelevant to the progress we left on the cutting room floor. This process is open, fair, and balanced. That's the facts. So with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Mr. Baker to introduce the agenda and how we'll move
Mr.
forward.
Chair, my hand is up, and I believe I have the right to respond to all that you just said.
Mr. Dreys, I'm going to use my prerogative as chairman to keep the meeting forward. You have my number and my email. We can certainly talk. But
Now
right now
you
we
use
have a
the
10 o'clock
prerogative as
deadline,
chairman.
and we're going to
Today,
follow
the meeting I
Mr.
complained
Baker.
about.
Mr. Baker, you have the floor.
Sir, I have the right to speak at this meeting, particularly in response to that statement you just made. And if you say I don't, it's another example of your methods. You do not.
Mr. Dreys, you have the floor.
Having made that long speech, if you wanted to make that long speech, you had to be prepared for a rebuttal. Otherwise, you could have
I'm
called
here.
me on
You have the floor, Mr. Dreys. We have a 10 o'clock hard stop. The floor is yours.
You
Mr.
just
Dreys
spent
from the
5
minority
minutes
party.
talking about what I said on a TV show. I think if you thought that 5 minutes of this meeting's time was worth that statement, I have a right to rebut. Let's be fair, honest, and transparent, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dreys, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I don't think I need that long. My principal complaint at the time that you talked about was that the discussion about removing criteria related to parties took place when there was no representation by the other party present, which strikes me as incongruous. I told you, as a matter of courtesy, that I was going to be late to the meeting, and it didn't seem to me to be a stretch that you would defer that particular conversation until I was there. I will also note that the criteria that were given to this committee were proposed by the mayor, were approved by the Budget and Effectiveness Committee, which I chair, and which were accepted and approved by the entire council. I don't believe this committee has the standing to change those instructions that it received from the full council without a vote of the full council. So if we're going to be honest and transparent and fair, I can tell you it would have been a lot more dignified to wait until I got there, and I would have pointed out to you that I thought that the outcome of this entire process would not be affected by the removal of those criteria, and that we could have reached a good result without stirring this issue up. I don't see what purpose was served. If you're saying that your goal the whole time was to preserve 2 Republican districts, that's a partisan goal, but somehow we can't have partisan criteria. I think you're a little uneven in your application of transparency and fairness. And now, Mr. Chair, if we can proceed with the meeting, I think that would be wonderful.
Well, thank you for those comments, Mr. Dreys. And let me respond one time, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Baker, right? Because we can talk about this offline.
We're in a hurry before.
The foundation for building maps are the criteria, Mr. Dreys. That's the starting point, Mr. Dreys.
Thank you for pronouncing
You were
it
not
properly.
present at the meeting, Mr. Dreys. And so we started the meeting.
The name is Driggs.
Would you allow me the
not
floor?
Driggs.
I gave you the floor with the courtesy. Now, the floor is mine.
You
Thank
didn't give me the floor. I took it.
Well, again, you told me I have prerogative for the chair. And so.
Can we proceed with the meeting,
Are
sir?
you through,
said
Mr.
you're
Dreys?
saying
The floor is
that
yours.
line. I think it's time to get down to the business at hand.
Mr. Dreys, the floor is yours.
No, I don't want the floor. I want to proceed with the meeting.
All right,
Just stop
thank you,
talking
sir.
about it. You had your
Thank
say.
you.
Fine,
So
let's go.
again, Mr. Dreys and committee members, the goal is to be transparent and fair. And Mr. Dreys, with all due respect, you were not at the meeting on time, and the meeting proceeded without you. And
I
we
was at a
started-
doctor's
Mr.
appointment.
Dreys, the floor is mine. And we started with foundation building. Mr. Baker, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for your agenda today, we have 4 items, and we will go through the process of informing you of the numbers that we've received from the Census Bureau data, and we have some maps. So we'll start with an update on the Census Bureau data. We have gotten the final release of those numbers, and I will say, because staff might not say it, the incredible job that our staff did in getting those numbers together. I think we're actually well in advance of where I thought we would be at this point in time, because they were able to take the raw data and put it into a usable form that very closely matched the final numbers coming from the Census Bureau. So we'll speak about that, and then we'll move on to various options that have been put together. And I would ask Mr. McCarley to walk us through those particular maps. We'll also talk about the communication plan. Obviously, this is a lot of information and a lot of change for the Charlotte community, and we want to make sure that all of that information is available to the community, and to make sure that this is, as you've said, a very open and transparent process. And then we'll discuss the calendar, reminding the community of the various listening sessions that we'll be having in advance of a public hearing that's required by the statute in advance of any vote that the full council will take on this matter. So I believe I might turn it over to Rebecca for the first matter of the update of the census data.
Before we do that, I just want to thank the staff. They did a tremendous job in terms of literally matching the information that we got from the Commerce Department and the census data. So I just want to thank them for their work, and turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Good morning, everyone. I would be remiss if I didn't give full credit to Robert and Evan Lowry here behind me. They've done the heavy lifting to put these numbers together. Could we go to the next slide, please? The rough cut numbers that were showed to committee in the last meeting have been refined, and so we have a little bit of a change to the grand total and equal size from the last time we talked. So equal size went from about 125 down to this 124. This change is based on the hard work that our staff went through to match all the different boundaries that come into play in this project: census blocks, council district boundaries, and the precinct boundaries. So we are still very close here to the grand total. If you look at data.census.gov, you'll see that 874 number that we have is just a couple off from the total, and we've updated then the variance. So we are still off in districts 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So very close in 7. And then this is the summary of the total population by race and ethnicity for each district, as well as the number of registered voters and the party, voter registered party. And these numbers are final. The summary data from the census was released last week, so we were able to double check and make sure that we were giving you very precise numbers to work from for the redistricting project.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mr. Baker, we'll just follow the agenda as outlined.
I think so, yes. And I think we'll turn it over to Mr. McCarley to walk us through the maps.
Thank you both. Using the criteria that the committee announced and the chairman's goals, we have drafted some maps. What you'll look at this morning are 4 different maps. The first one will be a least change map, which is simply an effort to come into compliance with the constitutional requirement of roughly equal population in the districts, but probably not matching very many of the other criteria. But it's just an example to see if you can get into compliance with a least change. That least change map will only move 3 precincts, but probably doesn't do any of the other things that the committee wanted to do. Plans B and C try to meet as many of the criteria as possible and we'll go through those in a little bit more detail. And then Plan D, we were asked to look at a plan that tried to use transit corridors as the organizing theory for it. Although that's not one of the criteria that the committee adopted, we took a shot at that, and we'll show you what that looks like and whether it's possible to do and which of the criteria it does or does not meet. So let's go back to Plan A. If you'll put that on the screen for me, please. This is the least change map. It only moves 3 precincts, and if you're looking for the 3, it will be the top precinct in District 5 on the far right side of the map. 205 moves from 4 to 5. Then if you go near the center city, you'll see that Precinct 22 moves from District 3 to District 1. And then if you'll go straight down South Boulevard from that, you'll notice that Precinct 77 moves from District 3 to District 6. That maintains the Republican advantage in District 7, but degrades that advantage from 30.7 to 29.9 in District 6, and probably puts a precinct 77, into District 6 that has more in common with District 3 population than with District 6 population. I'm not sure, I wouldn't say we recommend this map, but I want the committee and the community to at least see that it's possible to get close into compliance with moving very few precincts. The last thing I would say about this map is that one of the criteria that it absolutely does not meet is trying to have the 3 districts that are growing faster than the others, and that's the districts 3, 2, and 4. It does not leave room for growth in those districts. For example, District 2 comes in at 3.5% above the ideal district size, and District 4 comes in bumping at 4.8% above the ideal district size, leaving absolutely no room for growth. Any questions from the committee members about that map before we move on?
Floor is open for questions from committee members in reference to map A. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Can I ask a question?
Recognize Council Member Phipps.
Okay, thank you. When you say that the district draft plan A map would not allow for any more growth, does that mean that the ETJ areas that's coming in would be impacted by that?
Yes and no, Mr. Phipps. The issue is less about ETJ area and more about expected development in areas that are being annexed into the city and the expected continued growth in the 3 districts that are growing the most now or have grown the most in the last 10 years. So it's trying, and by the way, let me be really clear for the community. I'm not saying that you can't grow. That obviously those districts are going to continue to grow, but what will happen is that we will be out of balance quicker if you start at a very high variance like 4.8 in District 4. District 4 will quickly grow out of that. That doesn't mean we have to redistrict before the next census, but it certainly means that you've degraded the vote of the people in that district by having so many more in that district than are in other districts.
Councilmember Drakes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mac, you're referring to the criteria. Is there some way you can create like a score sheet or something that shows us what that thought process was, like how the criteria apply to these different maps?
I can. It will be very subjective, but yes.
I just, something so that we have something to hold on to related to your comments about how these things conform to our various priorities.
Yes, sir. I will be glad to produce that.
Thank you.
With advanced statement that it's necessarily very subjective.
I trust your judgment. I just want to have something to capture what you're telling us about these priorities. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, ready to move to Plan B?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. So, Mr. McCarley, what is the population we are looking at for each one of this district with this Plan A? Was that on the slide before?
Are you asking for the total population or the variance figures?
Yes, the total population for each district.
All right. In this one, District 1 would have a population of 126,721, which is 1.4% over the ideal district size. District 2 would be 129,293 for 3.5% over ideal district size. District 3 would be 123,431, which puts it 1.2% below the ideal size. District 4 would have a population of 130,976 or a variance of 4.8% above ideal size. District 5 would have a population of 120,286, putting it 3.7% below ideal district size. District 6 would be 119,127, putting it 4.7% below ideal size. District 7 would have 124,819, leaving it at 0.1% below ideal size. Pretty much right on target, as it is today.
Thank you. So it does meet our plus or minus 5% goal. However, it's still not balanced of 125,000 population per district.
Correct. It is the least change you can do and still meet the constitutional requirement of being plus or minus 5% off of the ideal district size. But that's about the only criteria it actually meets.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions in reference to map A from the council members, committee members? There being none, we'll move on to map draft Plan B. Mr. McCarley.
Draft B and C are two where we tried to meet as many of the criteria as possible. So with map B up on the screen, this moves 15 precincts. It maintains a Republican advantage to the extent that historically they have historically leaned Republican in result, if not statistics, and this maintains roughly those same statistics. 7, in fact, is unchanged at 32.7% Republican, and in this map, District 6 increases by 0.4% for Republican registration in that district. What this one does not do, by the way, and frankly, it was very difficult to do it in any of them, is to try and accommodate the growth issue. So before we go through the details of this plan, let me give you a discussion of trying to meet the growth criteria. If you look at the map, you'll notice that the size, the geographic size of the precincts in districts 3, 2, and 4 are noticeably larger than the precinct sizes in districts 1, 5, and 6. There's no uniformity to the size of precincts, so you can't simply do a one-to-one shift when you're moving population. The smallest precinct in Charlotte has about 1,800 people in it. The largest precinct in Charlotte has about 19,000 people in it. That made it difficult to try and make these shifts and have districts 3, 2, and 4 a little bit under, because the precincts, because of their geographic size, and it's a smaller number of precincts in those large districts, moving any precinct out takes a pretty big chunk of people. And to not split precincts, which would be a really bad move, it's very hard to accommodate the growth issue. So having said that, let's talk through the draft Plan B. This one maintains the Republican advantage in districts 6 and 7. 7 is unchanged. And as I mentioned, the Republican advantage in District 6 goes up by 0.4%. 7 is untouched in this map. And one of the positives is that all of the districts in this map are very close to the ideal district size. District 6 is the furthest out from the ideal, and it is at 3.2% under the ideal, and that's the largest variance. All the other variances are under 2%. If you look at the map, you'll see that the significant changes come at the borders of the precincts, at borders of the districts. So starting up at the top of the map, the spot between 4 and 1, you'll see that District 26 comes out of District 4, and 42 and 82 come out of 4 and go into 1. Then moving clockwise, you'll go down to District 5, and you'll see that Precinct 3 moves into District 5, and up to the right of that, at the border between 4 and 5, you'll see that Precinct 205 moves down from District 4 into District 5. The other significant changes are in 6 and 3. If you look at the very top of District 6, you'll see that precincts 35, 18, 1, 8, and have been moved from District 1 into District 6. We've also moved, to balance population a bit, we've moved 37 from District 6 into District 1. The last set of changes are at the north end of District 3. You'll notice that precincts 20, 23, 24, and 81 move from District 3 into District 2. District 3, as you remember, started out with the largest variance in population. It was 12.8% over the ideal district size. So it took a fairly substantial number of people coming out of District 3 to balance it. So those are the major changes that you'll see. Ready for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Floor is open for questions in reference to draft Plan B. Are there any questions? Ms. Ashmere, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are we taking no census responses into account, Mr. McCarley?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Are we taking no census responses into account?
Those census responses.
No.
Those.
Well, we do know that we had low census response in certain precincts, certain districts. So are we accounting for that in this map?
Now I get it. You're asking, do we take account of the claimed undercount in the census?
Yes.
No, ma'am, we don't. We have to go by the census numbers. Whatever they are, we are stuck with the census numbers.
So is that statutory requirement?
It's a case law requirement. We are required to redistrict based on the census.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Any questions? Draft Plan B.
I got one.
Floor is yours.
Yeah, so it still looks as if, I guess, even District 3 and District 4 look, I mean, District 3 still looks like it has a large land mass of I guess the dimensions of the district is still, I mean, is it still the largest district there? In District 4, it looks like, did we include some precincts going out to the west there? Because it looks like that arc is curving on over. Did you indicate that we moved some precincts from, I guess, 2 into 4? Did I miss that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Phipps, you are absolutely correct. I left out one of the changes, and it's the district precinct 211 up at the top of the map, moved from District 2 to District 4. As we discussed in our previous meeting, the way we moved population in this is you start with District 3 and try to get about 16,000 people out of 3 and move them into 2. Then you move them out of 2 into 4 and 1, and then you move them out of 4 and 1 into 5 and 6, and 1 into 6. So yes, I did omit the fact that we moved precinct 211 from District 2 into District 4. You're correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions in reference to draft Plan B? Hearing none, Ms. McCarty, move on.
Draft Plan C. This plan is relatively similar to Plan B. It moves 17 precincts. It also maintains the Republican advantage in 6 and 7, and 5 of the 7 districts are under 2% variance. So again, we'll start at the very top of the map, and this time, Mr. Phipps, I will note that precinct 211 moves from 2 to 4. Also, precinct 146 moves from 2 to 4. Then at the bottom of 4, you'll notice that 42, 82, and 132 are moved into District 1. And then on the far right side of the map, we again moved precinct 205 from 4 into 5. Coming down in the border between 1, 5, among 1, 5, and 6, you'll see that precinct 37 moves 35. I'm sorry, my glasses aren't good enough. Precinct 35 moves into District 6, along with 18, 1, and 8, which is at the northern end of District 6. Then moving up into District 3, we moved again 23, 24, and 81 into 2. I think that picks up all of the changes. The difference between B and C maps, if you'll look at precincts 26, 132, 32, and 103, you'll see the differences, but they're minimal. Questions on Plan C?
Floor is open for questions from committee members on draft Plan C. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we will move to draft Plan D.
Plan D is the one that we did to try and use a different theory of reordering the precincts to create a different map. In this case, the theory was to use transit corridors as the criteria so that more districts had a connection to the transit corridors than exists in the present map or in the other plans. This one moves 10 precincts. It pushes 6 and 7 to have a connection to the transportation corridors. There is a slight reduction of the Republican advantage in districts 6 and 7. And the one thing I would note for you is that transit corridors were not one of the adopted criteria of the committee, but we used this to see if it was possible to do. Now, to walk you through the map, you'll see that starting at the boundary between 4 and 5, we again move precinct 205 from District 4 to District 5. The rest of the moves are predominantly down on the south end of the map. I'll just note one precinct that moves from District 2 to District 1, and that's precinct 54 near the center city. But the rest of the moves come in 3 and 6 and 7. The key move is that you'll see new precincts in District 7 that connect it to the rail corridor coming down and to 77. So it crosses South Boulevard to pick up precinct 77. And then on the east side of South Boulevard, it picks up 97, 114, and 92 to create that single point of contiguity between precinct 92 and precinct 87 in District 7, thus connecting it to the transportation corridor. We also moved, because we have to move a substantial amount of population out of District 3, you'll notice that precinct 98 moves from 3 into 6. Other precincts that move into 6 from 7, because we're basically swapping those precincts on the southwestern edge of 6 and putting them in 7. We needed to compensate for that by taking precincts out of 7 and moving them up into 6. You'll see those on the southeast corner of District 6. We've moved precinct 69, 100, and 103 from 7 into 6 to compensate for the precincts that we took out of 6 and moved into 7. The modest change in Republican representation in 6 and 7. In District 6, it drops by 0.2%, and in District 7, it drops by 1.4%. Questions, Mr. Chairman? Oh, one other thing. The other criteria that this one also doesn't meet well is the growth question. District 3 remains 1.3% above ideal, and District 4 is again bumping up against the maximum at 4.8%. And that's again just the difficulty of moving population in districts 3, 2, and 4 because of the size of the precincts. Not just the geographic size, but the population size.
Okay, floor is open from questions from committee members first, and then we'll pivot to Mr. Winston, who has a question. Mr. Drace, floor is yours. Councilmember Drace.
Sorry, still muted. I don't think District 4, Plan D is going to become the front runner for other reasons. So I just want to note right now that we certainly lose compactness for District 7. A 1.4% change is not inconsequential. That is easily the margin in a lot of races. And the fact that we're doing this map based on a criterion that was not among our adopted criteria, I'll just say at this point, I hope this, as I expect, does not turn out to be the front runner. Thank you.
Councilman Winston for a brief comment, sir.
Yes. So I requested us to look at a map that disrupts the crescent and the wedge nature of our city council districts. Mr. McCarley, can you tell us is it accurate to say that the shape of our districts were intentionally created to create a crescent and a wedge?
I would say that the districts have traditionally been created to try and match a segregated housing pattern that exists in the city, and that there are communities of interest. For example, District 5 is basically East Charlotte. District 4 is dominated by the university. District 6 and 7 are whiter than the rest of the city. They typically match the communities of interest, and those communities of interest are in many cases created by segregated housing patterns.
So as it was just stated, our political lines have been drawn to match the segregated nature of our city. We have stated in policy, namely our comprehensive 2040 plan, that we need to comprehensively adjust future policies to disrupt this over time. I was surprised that this topic has never come up in this committee's work. In fact, it seems as though the work of this process is being done in a way that will solidify and entrench the crescent and wedge nature for the next decade. I worked with staff to produce 3 maps that achieve some level of that disruption to the crescent and the wedge. And the chair has chosen to share this map, well, that does have the most subtle disruption of the crescent and the wedge. There are 2 other maps that exist, and I am requesting that staff make those other maps available for council and public discussion and consideration. I will note, as it was said, that this is not the charge of the committee. I am not a committee member, but I am one of the map makers. I think we have the prerogative to share our work with the community and my colleagues at large. So I hope that request will be honored. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Braxton. Now, we have reviewed the 4 draft plan maps, draft plan A, B, C, and D. And so the goal is to present these maps, if approved by this committee, to move forward. And so Mr. Driggs have pointed out that map D does not meet our agreed upon criteria. So the floor is open for motions to accept these maps for public consumption.
Mr. Chair.
I recognize Mr. Phipps, and I'll come back to you, Mr. Driggs.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Mr. Phipps.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand the similarities in draft map A and D, in as much as both of them, I think, result in very minimal population, I guess, consistency with the stated average goal. Is that correct?
Again, this is a subjective answer, but yes, sir, I would say that when I score these charts for you, I will comment on the community of interest question with maps A and D, that several of the changes in those maps probably don't comport as well with the community of interest standard as maps B and C.
Thank you.
Mr. Driggs.
Thank you. We have 4 maps here. What will be the process going forward for taking on board community input or reactions from other council members? Are these maps meant to be at sort of a departure point for any fine tuning that could occur? I don't think we should attempt a wholesale reorganization of the districts, but I'm just wondering what the process will be going forward based on the maps that we approved today.
The goal would be, Mr. Driggs, to release these maps as draft maps from the committee for public consideration. There will be our public engagement sessions and our public meetings and presentations will be around the maps that have been drafted if this committee adopts them for release. These maps, if they are approved and forwarded to the public for their consideration, are subject to change and to be amended based on that feedback that we get from the public. Council members always are members of the public as well, and I'm pretty sure once these maps are released today, they will have their input as well in terms of any suggestions, amendments, or changes, etc. And so my goal today is to hopefully have the committee vote these maps out of the committee for public consideration as a starting point, knowing that there may be some amendments to them based on public input and input from council members who are also members of the general public.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion for us to move forward to the next stage for public consumption?
Yes, we would need a motion on A, B, C, and D.
Okay, I make a motion to move forward.
A motion has been properly made to move forward with A, B, C, and D. Is that your motion?
That's correct.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I have a question.
Question, Mr. Phipps.
Yeah. Given that we have included as part of this group of maps a map that does not comport with our criteria, would it be fair and feasible then to include a map that that would reflect the criteria that we omitted, just to see what it would look like?
I think I want to answer from Mr. McCarley. Mr. McCarley, you heard the question, and then I'll respond.
I think the criteria that was omitted had to do with paying more attention to the partisan balance that exists today, which really means a reference to District 6 and 7. I think when you look at the maps, you'll see that at least B and C, and to some extent A, at least for District 7, we have given you the statistics that show that B and C pretty much comport with the criteria that we omitted, which was paying attention to the traditional balance of parties in those two districts. B and C actually match that criteria.
And that's the response, Mr. Gregg, I was going to give myself, that I think we've accomplished the goal of ensuring that there is political balance based on the options that we present to the community. I think that goal has been accomplished.
So I would add one thing. Part of the reason that they balance is because the community of interest criteria creates about the same result as paying attention to partisan registration in 6 and 7. So as we were moving precincts to balance out other districts, what made sense was to add precincts into 6 that matched its communities of interest. And that meant taking some of the precincts out of the south end of District 1 to put into District 6. So community of interest ended up producing the same result as paying attention to partisan registration.
Councilmember Grace?
Thank you. I think District 7, I'm still struggling to understand why Plan D would be a contender here. It is based on a criterion that is not on our list. And I think including it in the maps that we move forward is just going to distract from the discussion we really need to have about B and C, in my mind. So I would like to make a substitute motion that we move maps A, B, and C forward and not D.
I don't think you have a second to the first motion.
Exactly. Is there a second to the first motion? And that first motion by Councilmember Ashmere is to move forward maps A, B, C, and D. It needs a second. That motion fails because doesn't have a second. So it goes to Mr. Drake's motion, which is to move forward maps A, B, and C. Is there a second for that?
I second.
Motion's been moved and properly second. Council members ready for a vote? Any questions on the motion before the council, before the committee? There being none, the motion has been called to accept draft plan A, B, and C to present to the community for public consideration. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? It carries unanimously 4-0. All right, Mr. McCarley, thank you very, very much for presenting those maps. We'll pivot to reviewing the communication plan in terms of how we will communicate with the public, and in terms of what we just did. And so I turn it over to our guru over there. Welcome.
Thank you. Wendy, can you bring up, thank you. So I'm going to try to go through this fairly briefly. It's fairly straightforward. I shared a version of this previously. So hopefully, if you have any questions, we'll get those at the end. So we tried to do here is hit. Oh, next slide, please. Here are kind of our key goals that we want to try to really focus on. One, obviously, we want to increase awareness of the process and the impacts that it has to our residents. We want to educate them on the hows and the whys of the process. So that way, on the public engagement, they know the opportunities, we get good quality engagement, really help the process. And also, it's important, we want to ensure the transparency in the process and instill a level of confidence in the process and how this is moving forward. So looking at this through that lens as we kind of go through the tactics. Next slide. So we're trying to go through digital media, earned media, paid, and some direct feedback opportunities. The approach here is we want to go broadly with a lot of our communications tactics to hit as most people as possible. But we also know that the folks that are in these precincts that are potentially impacted by these moves, we really want to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and really focus on them. So a lot of broad approach, but also some opportunities to drill down, balancing, right? We have a very, we have different audiences that like to receive information very, very differently. And so part of this is, quote unquote, new media tactics, very driven by digital, but we have some more what I would call traditional media tactics that are kind of more the tried and true old school approaches so that we can try to get everybody engaged with this.
And I hope that we're broad and wide in our distribution, Axios, Charlotte Ledger, Charlotte Post, QC Metro, online publications. I really want the maps to be distributed far and wide to a wide audience in various different media channels.
Absolutely. And we'll get this in some of the subsequent slides. So we go to digital media. So couple things to highlight here. I think, one of the things that we've done in other campaigns that's been successful is kind of set up a hub approach and a one-stop shop. We don't want people to have to go to multiple sites to get the information that they need. So there's a dedicated redistricting webpage. It's already up, cltgov.me/redistricting. That's going to be the one-stop shop. So if one of the few things someone remembers is where do I go to get information, it's all going to be up there. All the materials that come out of these meetings, everything will live there. So it's a condensed place for people to get information. Social media campaign, right? It's an important channel. We can do a lot with this to really drive people to this website, to make them aware of what's going on, where they have additional opportunities, and really drive the awareness, the education, and invite them into these sessions. I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do some paid media advertising through social later on in the presentation, but that is an aspect of this to really blast this out. Web stories and videos, that's the content. We've already put up several stories. We're working on some videos to really give people a variety of ways to receive this information. So that if people prefer to watch a video, we'll have that. If they prefer to read a short story, we'll have that. If they want a long story, we'll have that as well. And then the email blasts, we've got our database and we're going to continue to leverage that. Those are folks who are already engaged and want to make sure that they stay engaged. Earned media, this is more, traditional in terms of engaging with the media. We've been sending out press releases as we hit certain milestones. We'll be continuing to do that. And then also doing press conferences. We did one previously. We got another one coming up. Make sure that members of the media have the opportunity to ask questions of the chair and other key staff to kind of be able to delve into this and communicate the information accurately and appropriately to all these various audiences. It's one of the ways we hope to kind of go broad. These press conferences, as they are always open to any members of the media, any outlets, continue to do that. So we'll keep making sure we have those opportunities. All right, next one. So paid media, as I mentioned, we'll be boosting posts across social media channels. The opportunity we have here is to really get into the geo-targeting. We can take a look at the precincts that are going to potentially be impacted, and we'll be able to drill down and really push out some of these messages from an education awareness standpoint. So we're really trying to hammer in on these areas that could be potentially impacted. And that's where we can really kind of drill down and focus on those regions. That will point people back to the website and engagement opportunities, as well to, we've got a vanity inbox. So again, one-stop shop where people can ask questions, send feedback. That's redistricting at charlottenc.gov. That's what we'll be able to drill down. We're also going to be putting out some radio, print, digital ads on stations across the region. It is a broad approach, but we do want to be broad and really kind of spread this out so that we were getting as many people. You know, we can look at the different media outlets, get different audiences. So we're going to try to get really, really broad with this, hit a lot of people through this tactic. And then Mecklenburg County, I've been told that the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections will be sending mailers to every household impacted by these changes following the adoption of the maps. So that's something that will go out there to help people understand how they've been impacted by this change. And then direct feedback opportunities, I had mentioned, we've created, again, we have a hub website. We want to give people a centralized way to communicate, send feedback back in. So redistricting at charlottenc.gov, that mailbox is open and we can receive feedback. We'll be able to centralize it and provide that. And then 2 events for public engagement are currently planned. October 5th is our public engagement session and a public hearing on October 18th. We're really going to publicize those dates a lot and really hammer on that. So people make sure that they know when they are, how to engage, and they have access to the information so that way they're really prepared to engage with the committee. That is the short, quick version.
Thank you for that presentation. I think also the committee members should know that I have received official requests for presentations from community groups. Thus far, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the Black Political Caucus, and the Democratic Party, they all have requested that we come and make a presentation to their groups in person and or virtually relating to the map. I think it's more appropriate that those presentations be made by our consultant versus me. And so I have communicated those requests to the attorney's office and to Mr. McCarley to schedule those public meetings. I may be there and or a member of the committee to introduce Mr. McCarley, but it'll be Mr. McCarley and his team that will be making the formal presentations to those groups. It should be noted that we have not heard anything from the Republican Party. So if your party would like a formal presentation, we're fair and balanced, sir. Councilmember Phipps, and then we'll follow by Councilmember Drakes.
Yes, I was just wanting to know, have any of these platforms been launched yet? And as much as we've had 3 meetings of this committee so far.
Yeah, so the website, the hub that is up, it was populated as information comes out of the committee, that goes there. The email inbox is up and running, and we have been creating and publishing content and pushing that out on social for weeks, if not longer at this point. So we've been up and running on this. Now that we're at this key milestone with the maps, those will be published and made available. And then we'll start getting into some of the other tactics in terms of paid media, paid ads. We've already done one press conference, another one coming up. So yes, sir, we've been working and we haven't been waiting.
Okay. I know a week or so ago, I posted the chairman's remarks and explanations on next door, and that post received, I mean, a very spirited debate in terms of the necessity for redistricting and pros and cons. So I think the public is ready for some feedback on it. So that was encouraging to know, even though it was initial criticism that they thought the post was too long, but evidently they did read it because there was a host of responses to it. Thanks.
Mr. Drake?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was particularly interested in the emails to people in the affected precincts. They are obviously kind of more interested, perhaps, in the general public. And how would we go about doing that? And in particular, if the conversation about the maps it results in any change from these 3 maps, will we then notify people in a precinct that might become affected by that?
Yeah, so without drilling too deep into it, and happy to if you want to. So we can leverage our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Nextdoor, and target based on zip code. So we look at where the precincts lay over on top of the zip code. Got some folks on my team who are smarter than I who will put together the geo-targeting and start to push that out so it really focuses on people geographically who are affected by that. And yes, sir, as the potential precincts that are impacted, as they shift, we can shift with that.
So the message that they get will say, this means you, right? I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't know if you asked them what precinct they're in, which one it is. So I'm hoping that people who might be affected get a message along the lines of your precinct is one of the ones involved in this conversation. Would that happen? Or would they get a note?
And kind of chop that up on a pretty narrow gradient, so to speak. So we can customize some of this to some degree. The biggest thing will be driving them to the website for more information, because obviously on social we're limited to the amount of information we can provide in those channels. But it'll be go to the website for more information. Here are your engagement opportunities. This means you. Please get engaged.
And will the website have an opportunity to post comments like the 2040 plan one did? Or how are we going to capture or try to process the feedback we get?
So the website itself won't necessarily have a direct mechanism, but we stood up that a dedicated email address to it, so it'll serve the same function. So the redistricting at charlottenc.gov, that'll be where we're driving people to send feedback, questions. Staff will be able to gather that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I appreciate your invitation. I'll find out if the Republican Party or any members would be interested in hearing your presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drakes. Okay, so
Chairman, I have 2 questions.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. So will our consultant be available for community meetings with district reps?
We would prefer virtual meetings if there are going to be a number of them. There are 2 of us, Ladidra Matthews and me, and we are also doing one other urban community in North Carolina, the redistricting work. So we're going to be spread fairly thin for the next couple of weeks. Yes, we can do some additional meetings, but we would ask that we try to stay at large groups, not get to too small a group.
And Councilmember Ashmere, part of what we're going to do, I need to talk to Jason, is probably a live call-in show, right, that the mayor suggested that we do. And so we can capture as many people at one time versus, and again, that's we're trying, right? I'm sorry, we're going to do it. This is something that the Donna just gave me that look like, say, what? but something that we're going to try to do if it's possible. By suggestion of the mayor, where we can actually, folks can make the presentation and we appeal to a wide audience versus going to various neighborhood organizations and groups, if that's possible.
One of the other things we could do, if the groups are open to it, is record some of these sessions and post them and make them available. We do that with a lot of stuff. So that way, if a member of the group can't make it, my assumption is there's probably a overlap on questions and issues and concerns. So it's something we can record some of these sessions. We'll put them on our website. And that way, if people can't make it, or that could be another way for people to be able to, get information on their schedule as opposed to ours.
One of the things that we could do is tape Ms. Matthews and I could do a session for tape that covers the maps that are currently under consideration. And
So,
to
Mr.
put
Graham,
that on the website.
so that was my excited face because during the October 5th listening session, people can call in live.
Okay.
So they can give virtual comments and they can, on social media, they can actually be inside of the WebEx like they are now and chat with us, and they can physically, they can actually talk through and have conversations with us similar to what we did for 2040.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Councilmember Ashburn, I think I stepped all over your floor. So it's still yours.
No, I think those are all good suggestions. So did I hear that all the forums that our consultants will be attending, the schedule will be on our website, is that correct? So let's say if community wants to have this interactive communication or discussion or have questions, they could directly ask our consultant.
That's what I'm hearing from Donata, and that's scheduled for October 5th. And so that's where we really want to draw attention to that particular date, a big audience as possible, because they'll be able to communicate by chat as well as calling in, Donata. So that's a great opportunity for community, neighborhood associations, political groups, et cetera, to be engaged, so that MAC won't be going all over town trying to do various communities groups. And we can be effective and efficient with our time. I should note that we do have a pretty rigid schedule to meet. And so the utilization of time and effort is going to really be important in terms of how we utilize max time, as well as the staff time to accomplish our goals and objectives.
Fair enough. We do have an aggressive deadline. Also, if constituents reach out to us directly, where should we direct those questions to? I know we had questions from Harry Taylor, who advocates for fair maps, and he had mentioned he had struggled with finding information online and took him 2 hours and still he wasn't getting all the information. And I'm hoping some of that would be addressed with our website updates. But in the event where constituent does reach out and have concerns, who should we direct those questions to?
Residents, they can sign up to speak at both the public hearing and the public engagement section at www.clt.gov.me/redistricting, and we'll send that out as well. And concerns or feedback, they can also do redistricting@charlottenc.gov. We'll make sure that gets in the package as well, and that's why it's really, really important. And I did talk to Harry as well, Dimple, so we're going to make sure he gets what he needs. And that's the purpose of the communication plan, to make sure that citizens know where to go to get the information, and we're going to make a big pitch starting today to get those websites and those email addresses out to the public for public engagement. There will be information, I would imagine, in the council package this week as well, with the maps and everything else. And we'll make sure that we have a cheat sheet in terms of where you need to send your constituents for questions, emails, those type of things. So we'll make sure that's in your package.
Mr. Chairman, you might ask Ms. Hefner to describe the data that will be posted on the website for folks who want to look at statistics and maps and other things.
Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mac. The underlying data that were used to put these maps together, which includes data from the 2020 census, as well as the voter data file from Mecklenburg County and some population projections from the planning department. They have been, in technical terms, mushed together, and that file will be posted on the city's open data portal, and we will link to it from the redistricting website that Jason just shared. In addition, we have put together a interactive map service that will be published, so members of the public can do what we did in the sessions where we were putting maps together. It's click on any given precinct and see the underlying data have the opportunity to really explore interactively the maps that have already been put together, but also to look at their own precincts as interested.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we've done good work here this morning, and I think we are well on our way in terms of communicating, engaging with the public. Again, these are draft maps that we will be presenting, maps, draft plan A, B, and C. They are subject to change based on public comment and feedback, and certainly comment and feedback from our council members, which is our ultimate audience at the end of the day, based on those public comments and feedback. So if there's not any other questions from council members, there being none, Mr. Baker, any final remarks?
I think that's it. We've covered all the communications going forward. Look forward to continuing on the process.
Mr. McCarley, final comments?
No, sir. Look forward to the next step.
Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.